Welcome to our first webinar, Stonebelt's first webinar of the year, getting started. What to do, what do I need to know to build belonging and inclusion in our congregation? I am your host, Reverend Sarah Vanderzee McKenney. I am the spiritual support coordinator for Stonebelt ARC. And for those of you who may not know, Stonebelt is a nonprofit service provider that offers a wide range of support services for people with intellectual and or developmental disabilities, as well as neurodivergent folks. We are located in Bloomington, Bedford, and Columbus, Indiana. We are a secular organization. Therefore, we strive to offer support to people of any and all or spiritual faith or spiritual practices. We are a community-based organization, which means we promote full integration, inclusion, and belonging of people in their community. Now, before we dive in, I want to bring your attention to just a few more things. Please notice the donation site at the bottom of this screen, and I will also put it in the chat box here in a few minutes. We are offering our webinars for free, but we want to be able to bring you quality speakers like Shelly. So we do ask you to consider making a donation. This is our upcoming, or this is the remainder. So we've just started our webinar series for 2022. And this is our remaining webinar schedule. All webinars will be recorded and archived on our website. So feel free to go back and share this webinar with others. On our webpage, you will also find free resources, book suggestions, previous webinars. And this is a new and growing and changing page, so please check back often. If you are in the Bloomington, Indiana area and haven't signed your congregation up already, please think about signing up for the Building Belonging Congregation Commitment Program. This webinar is actually kicking us off for those who are in that program, so welcome. And you will get the benefits of working together with a cohort of other congregations working toward the same goal of working toward inclusion of people with disabilities in your congregations. And you will also get one-on-one consultation and support to help assess where your congregation's at, set goals, and then work toward those goals. After 2 years, we ask for an ongoing partnership and commitment, as this is not a one and done deal, but a commitment for continued work toward inclusion and belonging. So if you're interested, please either check our website, which again, I'll include that in the chat box here shortly, or email me, which will also be in the chat box here shortly. Just some Zoom instructions for you. All of you are going to be muted and your video is turned off, so just sit back and relax. Let's see, what else? You can engage in this. We encourage you to engage. You can use the chat function, which is at the bottom of your screen. You may need to move your mouse or touch your screen depending on what device you're using. And you'll go to the speaking bubble. Feel free to use this to share your information, who you are, where you're from, what you do, or just engage in the conversation that we're having. You will also see a Q&A option as well, and this is for asking questions. Feel free to ask questions throughout. Shelly and I will keep an eye out for that and maybe answer some throughout, but then we'll also have a time at the end as well. And finally, closed captioning is available and turned on. You also have control over this if you go to the CC box on your screen. You can either turn those on or off. or you can click on the show full transcript to see the running transcript on the side of your page. Shelly is giving you a special offer. Thank you so much, Shelly. So if you are watching this, you will have the opportunity to take her up on this deal. So email Shelly. Email is on your screen. I will also put this in the chat. And just send her an email, mention this webinar, and you will get a signed copy for 15% off and with free shipping. And again, I'll put this in the chat, and I'll also put it in a follow-up email as well. Without further ado, it's time to introduce you to our guest speaker, Shelly Christensen. She is a pioneer in the Jewish and interfaith disability inclusion movements. She holds 20 plus years experience working with synagogues, schools, and agencies at local and national levels, and international Jewish organizations. She is founder and CEO of Inclusion Innovations and co-founder of Jewish Disability Awareness, Acceptance, and Inclusion Month. She has her BA in journalism and an MA in developmental disability studies. She is a fellow of American Association on Intellectual and Developmental Disabilities and the 2021 recipient of the Reimagining Spirituality Leadership Award from AAIDD. Many of you know her as the core council member of Institute on Theology and Disability, or you may also know her as the co-host of Everyone's Welcome, a fresh conversation about disability with Gabrielle Kaplan-Meyer. And as already mentioned, she is the author of a very practical, very user-friendly, wonderful resource and tool, From Longing to Belonging, a practical guide to including people with disabilities and mental health conditions in your faith community. Shelly, welcome.
Thank you, Sarah. I'm so happy to be here. I live in Minneapolis, but I'm coming to you from Virginia Beach, Virginia, right on the ocean. It's a very windy day today, and it's kind of dark and bleh, but it's warmer than Minnesota and there's no snow. I'm here for the Faith Inclusion Network Leaders Retreat, and there are about 20 of us here for this day from a variety of faith traditions. And we've been just kind of talking about some of the challenges in our field, as well as the opportunities that have happened a lot because of the pandemic and how we've been using Zoom and so forth. Challenges are the ones that you're facing in your own congregation and your own community organization. So one of the things that I've been focusing on a lot is this: if you're streaming services, streaming events, and so forth, still using Zoom, you can activate the free captioning. And I just put this slide up here, and you'll get this in your handout after this program is over, when Sarah sends everything out. It's just so simple to get it started, and it's just going to take you right through it. It's in your settings, go to accessibility, and you'll see captions will look like this. And then you have to scroll down pretty far where it says closed captioning is available. Just click on that, and that will activate the captioning. And then, as Sarah explained when you were coming onto the webinar, that you can click on that live transcript button at the bottom of the screen, and that will produce the transcripts, or the captions. So there you have it. That's one of the first tips of the day. We love to do tips. Inclusion and belonging are a combination of actions as well as a series of ways to understand what it means to belong. And that's the part I really love. There's also the practical things. What do you do? I'm going to touch on some of those things today, but I wanted to really kind of give you an overview of what you have in store and what to look forward to in terms of your own community and your commitment. I love the idea that Stone Belt is convening a cohort of congregations to do this together. And I want to say no one does this alone. When I was starting in my field in Minneapolis, I ran a program dedicated to inclusion of people with disabilities and mental health conditions. And the program grew and grew and grew because we had a cohort of congregations that were invested and involved in the process of becoming houses of worship for all people. And I'll talk a little bit about that later. A little bit about me. This is my family. These are the things and people I love, my dogs, my family, and celebrating holidays together. And I love to bake. And knit. And I can't imagine these things not being in my life. But most importantly, they give me a sense of belonging. And this is just one of the most, once I realized that belonging was it for me and for a lot of other people, it really changed my approach in working with congregations. In my family, one of our sons was diagnosed with an autism spectrum disorder. And it was because of him, because of love, that I became his ally and advocate, and was totally drawn into this work that I do. And I do consider it a calling, a purpose. And I'm so honored to meet with all of you today and to be part of this. So I want to thank Sarah for making this possible. And if we want to go to the next slide, we certainly can. We really are thinking about the spirit of belonging. A sense of belonging is the heartbeat of inclusion. It's the key. And it's so important right now. I think this is a really opportune time, because for 2 years we've experienced the loss of our in-person communities. We've had to take risks and do things differently and figure out how to be together in a way that kept us all safe. And yeah, now, we're coming back together again. We had some of that last summer, and we've had so many changes. I think the consistency is that there's always change. And a lot of what has happened, we're just talking about this morning, is that a lot more people experienced what a lot of people with disabilities and mental health conditions and those who love them experience. And that is a sense of isolation, being cut off from community, of not being where you long to be, where you want to be. And I think that, that gives a lot of people in congregation land who are affiliated with faith communities, a lot of people with and without disabilities or mental health conditions, the opportunity to find something in common. And that thing that's in common that we all have as human beings is that need to belong. Let me just see what this next slide, isn't that silly? There we go. There's another nice slide about a sense of belonging. Okay. 20%, give or take, of our population in the US lives with a disability, a mental health condition. And it could be a disability that is visible. It can be a disability that is not apparent. And a disability in itself is part of being human. It's what happens in our places where we want to belong that can act as barriers to inclusion and to belonging. There's a big, by the way, I don't know if you heard that. Can you hear that, Sarah? Yeah, there's a meeting going on directly above me still. So it's sometimes the conditions. So for example, this is a good example. There's a set of stairs going into a building, and there's also a ramp, and it's just snowed, and you're familiar with snow just like I am. And someone is out there shoveling the steps, is a wheelchair user waiting to get in the building and said to the shoveler, you could clear the ramp first, and that way everybody can get in. So those are some of the barriers, some of those architectural barriers, and sometimes attitudinal barriers too that stand in the way. People with disabilities and mental health conditions want what anyone wants, what everyone else wants. That's to belong. And spirituality, religion, community, learning, being in that space where other people who share similar values or similar theology or similar histories want to be part. And so there's this growing, thankfully growing idea in faith communities now that faith communities are starting to realize that for too long they've operated under this premise, this mindset that looked at the disability, looked at what people couldn't do. And now the key is to look at what people can and want to do. It acknowledges that everybody has gifts and strengths, talents to contribute. So we go back to belonging being the key to inclusion. I think there's another slide right after this. Oh, yes, there is. It's a blank slide, but not anymore. We believe, all of us, we're created in the divine image from Genesis chapter 1, created in God's image. And a lot of times you'll see this phrase from Isaiah 56:7, my house shall be called a house of prayer for all peoples. I started thinking about that because it was a lot of congregations that were starting to think about inclusion. I had this on their websites and on their handouts, their e-blasts, my house shall be called a house of prayer for all peoples. And I realized this is an aspiration. This is where we want to be. We don't want to be, oh yes, this is a place for these people and these people, because all peoples are us. And so not being theologically trained, I thought there's got to be something that talks more about why a house of prayer shall be called a house of prayer for all peoples. And it was in Isaiah 56:7. It's the part of the verse that doesn't get quoted nearly as much. And that is this piece. I will bring them to my holy mount, and I will cause them to rejoice in my house of prayer. Their burnt offerings and their sacrifices shall be acceptable upon my altar. For my house shall be called a house of prayer for all peoples. And this it summed up so much about belonging, inclusion, about contribution, about gifts, about people being not one thing or one story, but people really being resting in wholeness and being able to bring that to the community, to the rest of the world. So let's go to the next slide. So I just wanted to just leave you with several definitions of disability. The Americans with Disabilities Act was signed into law. Why is my brain not working? In 1985. Okay, in the 80s. Sarah, I can't remember the date. And the definition is a person with a disability is someone who has a physical or mental impairment that substantially limits one or more major life activities. When we think of major life activities, we think of walking, certainly, seeing, hearing, speaking, thinking, eating, dressing, toileting, organizing, just so many things fall in that category. And the Center for Disease Control, I love that this is under the disease control, because I don't know anybody that thinks of disability as a disease, at least not anymore, but it's a condition. So it's a condition of the body or mind that makes it more difficult for the person with the condition to do certain activities and interact with the world around them. And that's interesting because, we talk about handicap parking. It's not even, we used to refer to people with disabilities being handicapped, but a person isn't handicapped. The environment does that, imposes a handicap on a person. Accessible parking, great. No accessible parking, suppose somebody drives a car and they have to park close to the building for whatever reason they have been given that sticker. That's accessible parking. It makes it accessible for someone. So I just wanted to go back to that.
ADA was worked on in the 80s, but finally came into being in July of 1990.
Thank you.
No problem.
I had 3 children in the 80s, and sometimes I feel like I lost a whole decade, and I sort of go, maybe that happened in the 80s if I can't remember.
I had to look it up again.
Thank you for doing that. Oh my gosh. So, out in the world these days, we are hearing a lot about diversity, equity, and inclusion, and rightly so. Last summer, I took a certification course on diversity, equity, and inclusion in the workplace. And the reason I took it was because I wanted to see if there was, and if I could learn something that would maybe apply to faith communities. Well, kind of the opposite happened. It's like everything that has been happening in faith communities was diversity, equity, and inclusion. And all of the speakers, every single one of them said, when we are in an environment that is made up of people of all different backgrounds, strengths, talents, the whole bit, and the environment removes obstacles to participate, equity, then there's inclusion. But what really leads to inclusion is feeling a sense of belonging and contribution. I thought that was really, really important to just call out. And this is a big movement going on now, of course, across the world. There's corporations have huge departments dedicated to DE&I. And I think within your congregations and your organizations, the people who are sitting in those pews, a lot of them may be part of an initiative, a DE&I initiative in their workplace, for example, or a nonprofit can be. And so this is a really good time to sort of leverage that understanding that's out there, and that it applies very much so in your house of worship, because those belonging is really one of the things that our theology and our practices and our tenets really support. Just a little bit about the other obstacles and barriers to participation. We see the physical barriers, the building barriers, the communication barriers. So for example, a great communication barrier, you're on Zoom and somebody who is deaf or hard of hearing and doesn't read lips is out of luck, because they can't read what's there. When we have to work really hard to remove these obstacles and to look for them as well. But the most challenging obstacle of all are our attitudes and our beliefs, things that are just almost inherent biases that we think about. We think about ableism. So ableism, it's an ism, and it's a real ism. It's the discrimination of and social prejudice against people with disabilities, and it's based on a belief that typical abilities are superior. At its heart, ableism is rooted in the assumption that people with disabilities require fixing, helping. They're charity projects, or like we say in my faith tradition in Judaism, people with disabilities are not a mitzvah project. It defines people by their disability, like racism and sexism. And ableism classifies an entire group of people, 20 to 25% of people, as less than. And they include these harmful stereotypes and misconceptions and generalizations of people with disabilities about what people can and can't do. And stigma is associated with that as well. And even the language we use, even the language that we use. And there's has always been the use of, I'll give you an example of special needs, the term special needs. It seemed to have evolved from the term special education, the educational right of children and teens to receive a free, appropriate public education in the least restrictive environment. And that's where the Individuals with Disabilities Act, or IDEA, which was passed in 1975. See, I was still paying attention in 75. That even special education has evolved to be inclusive education. And that's a really important thing. And so special needs really doesn't, it's kind of a euphemistic term. And we still hear it all the time. And when somebody says special needs, that's the language that they've been using. It's, and I just think that sometimes when we talk about our language, it helps us to think differently. Special needs may mean, oh, we've got to take care of people, or they're different than or less than. Now, everybody has needs. We all have needs to be in our lives. So that's just an example of language. Antiquated language, handicapped, people are handicapped, retarded, things. I just even cringe saying those words. People with intellectual and developmental disabilities, autistic people, deaf people. There's just different language that we use. Disability is not something to hide from because it's part of our condition as human beings. There you have it. Words have power, because not only reflects how we talk about people, but how we think about them as well. So, one question that, we'll go back to this slide. No, we won't. We'll go to this slide. When I wrote From Longing to Belonging, I structured it in this way, that there's two really key components of a community of belonging, where all people belong. There's the spirit of belonging, which leads to a culture where people feel that they belong. It's based on relationships. It's people, not programs. And it really is, again, asking people, having conversations with people, what's important to you? What do you want to do? How do you want to be present? Do you want to go to Bible study? Do you want to take part in our worship services? And for too long, that hasn't existed. So, spirit of belonging, it's treating people with dignity and respect. When you look in their eyes and you see that spark of the divine, that's all you need. I really believe that. Now, I want you to think about in your own life and what gives you a sense of belonging in your faith community, in your religious community, in your family, whatever that is that's linked to that spiritual sense in your life. And think about the things that give you a sense of belonging. What would your life be like if you didn't have those? And for so long, faith communities have really provided, I want to say, gatekeepers from people really being who they are and how they want to participate in their faith community. So if you think about that, we all want to belong. We all do. So the other part is the structure of inclusion. And I go into that in detail in my book. It's the second part of my book. The first part is the spirit of belonging. The second part is the structure of inclusion. And that goes through the step-by-step actions you can take to look at your organization and just see some of the things that are missing or you could do differently. So one of the things that I think holds us back is that we are all carers. We care about people. That's our DNA. That's in our DNA. And when you love someone or when you care about someone, you want to make sure they're okay, that they don't get hurt, that they're safe, that their needs are met. We do that. And then at some point, somebody we know and love will take a risk. They'll try something new. They might go counter to what we want them to do or think they should do. That's called the dignity of risk. So the dignity of risk, and in your own life, think back. Dignity of risk means that you try something new for you, and maybe you have a roadmap to get you there, and maybe you don't. And you might just not succeed. And what happens? If you don't succeed, you either don't do the thing that you wanted to do, or you find a different way to do it. It's always learning. And yet, for people who are seen as vulnerable, the dignity of risk is often denied them. It really is important that people are able to have a dignity of risk. It includes learning from one's mistakes as well as bad decisions and other skills too. And dignity of risk is how we learn, make mistakes, and explore the possibilities around us. And we can't treat people as fragile objects who need someone to always protect them. And so we don't have to put ourselves in that position of the stress of making sure everything goes according to plan for another person. It doesn't mean we go, yep, go out there and do whatever you want to do. It does mean that we walk alongside someone. And if they want to do something that's, a risk that's a risk maybe, or doing something, trying something new, go for it. Go for it. Okay. So we're going to get a little bit into the structure. What do we do now? Help. So I'm going to give you some tips that you can do. These are no cost or low cost things that you can begin to look at right now. They're not like, oh my gosh, we've got to, invest $50,000 in something. I don't even know what would cost $50,000, but maybe an elevator. If you don't have $50,000, find another way to get people to programs. Okay, so let's just spend some time with this. Maybe. There we go. The first thing, communications. Communications can do a lot. These are just some examples. I want to call out particularly website. And all of our websites, most people get their information off off a website, off Facebook, off all kinds of different platforms. But website, if somebody wants to find out about you, when services are and so forth, make sure your website is follows, I never get the initials right for all of this, but there is a protocol on how to create an accessible website. And you can even Google it and it'll take you through that. That your e-news blast, that's another piece that, you know, should be, that screen readers, people who use a screen reader, for example, want to use. Communications needs to be clear, plain language, nothing fancy. I'm just looking at my screen. Oh, here we go. This this little map right here on your website, on any invitations, on any communication, include a map of where accessible parking is, where the accessible entrances are, if there's an elevator, and put that map in there so somebody coming maybe for the first time knows where they need to go. That sends a message also that you are welcome here. This is a great sign, and you can order these online too. Accessible. This can be for entrances to your building, entrances to your classroom, can be outside of restrooms. So it's communicating accessibility. And that's really important. The other really great thing you could do, even starting right now, is put an accommodation statement in all of your information. An accommodation, and they're in my book too, but just to give you an example, an accommodation statement goes on all your communications as well. And it says, if you require an accommodation in order to participate, in order to join us, please contact by email or phone. Put a name of a person in there who a potential participant or congregant or somebody visiting can contact and request an accommodation. Now, I guarantee you that the floodgates will not be opened. I know we're always so afraid of that. Oh my gosh, if we put that out there, millions of people are going to try to, you know, we can't afford it and all these things are going to happen. Some of those accommodations are pretty basic. And here's the thing, if you don't know what to do, ask the person. That's like, ask the person. That's our thing. Okay. Just some other basics. Color contrast in your materials. If you want to contrast so people can see, I just had cataract surgery. It's amazing what contrasts really look like because I couldn't see them. Look at effective contrast. Text that you use. Sans serif is a whole lot easier to read than a serif font like Times New Roman. This is Calibri, Arial, Helvetica. Look at the lighting in person, okay? When you're in person, and hopefully if you're not already, hopefully you will be soon. Look at the lighting in your sanctuary, in your rooms. Is it bright? We all need additional lighting, so be sure and check that out. If you have a meal or if you have a fellowship opportunity, mark the foods. I just pulled this off of where else? Google. This is just where you can mark if a food has any of these allergens. And that is just such a blessing to be able to do that. Okay. So let's talk about organizing for inclusion. A lot of communities started a task force or a committee, and think about why you want to have a committee. Why do you have any committees, task forces, forums, anything like that, made up of lay and professional leadership, clergy? It's to attend to something that's really important. It's for input. It's for people to be involved. And I think that there's a lot of components in becoming a place of belonging that require some dedication. You know, some of the things I just listed, who's going to go around and look at the light bulbs or write an accommodation statement or determine when and how the website is going to be accessible? Who's going to look at the present level of inclusion? Do you for school, for religious school and programming, is there a form that parents fill out that they can say that their child has strengths in one area and may need some help in another area? You don't even have to ask if a child has an IEP. Chances are parents won't necessarily disclose that. But a committee really is it's kind of the backbone of the initiative. The truth is, it takes the whole community to foster change. And the committee or task force can help create those vehicles for that to happen. Who's involved? I think the biggest opportunity and the most necessary opportunity is to ensure that people with lived experience of disability and mental health, those who love them, are part of this committee. As the disability advocacy community says, nothing about us without us. As Kevin Costner was told in Field of Dreams, if you build it, they will come. I think have them already there and have the people for whom this will foster a great sense of belonging involved. Professional staff or clergy, someone from lay leadership. There can be people with relevant professional experience or personal experience. Now, the other thing is to remember, not everyone will be closely associated with disability or mental health. It could be members of your committee or people who want to be involved are really good at organizing, project management, those kinds of things, of inspiring people, of pulling together diverse groups of people from the organization. So the other thing is get people who will do, and not people who just come to meetings. I've been that person on some committees. It's kind of embarrassing to be that person that's just sitting there, but we need doers. Okay, the committee can do a lot of different things. It can, as we mentioned, implement different communication needs, do an exploration. Committees also can do an assessment and information gathering. This is my favorite part, one of my favorite parts of all. Let me ask you this question. How do you know where you're going if you don't know where you are? And this, it's called the process of assessment. And this process is really robust. It involves, and the task force or committee can spearhead this, it involves having a conversation with the people affiliated with the congregation who are directly involved in specific areas of congregational life. So if you want to look at accessibility in the organization, ask your executive director, for example. If you want to talk about worship, what are we doing now? What could we do better? Things that go to the clergy. If there's a forum or a committee, go to the committee chair also and have the conversation with them. This includes education. It's across the board, every single thing that you have. And once you summarize those assessments, you can really start to see patterns. You can see areas where you might want to start. And so that would be creating a roadmap. Okay, a mission and a vision. So I don't want to get too deeply into this right now because yeah, because we want to save some time for questions and so forth. So you will see themes. And this is it. Just dig in and ask and have conversations, whether it's with somebody who wants to belong. You don't have to have the answers. You don't have to presume the accommodations. I want to just share this idea of raising awareness. We just talked about that this morning at our retreat, about the importance of raising awareness. And the question is, somebody asked, well, we've been raising awareness for 20 years. How much longer do we have to raise awareness? Is it really raising awareness? Yeah, it is. And it used to be raising awareness was simply, yes, there are people with disabilities in our congregation, or there would be people in our congregation with disabilities if we raised awareness that there are people who really want to belong. So I just gave you some examples of different ways to raise awareness in the actually global Jewish community now. Jewish Disability Awareness, Acceptance, and Inclusion Month is every February. There are offices of disability concerns nationally. There are congregational initiatives. Just go to your faith organization, kind of the home base, the home planet. I don't know. Just go there and ask. Just say, we want to raise awareness. We want to plan something. Are there resources? Is there someone I can talk to there? Because there really are. That's probably my last slide. So I just want to check really quickly. One of the things I really want to say to you is this. One of the most, I don't even need these. Cataract surgery. One of the biggest kind of mindset obstacles, there's the fixed mindset. This is how we've always done it. Or we believe this about people with disabilities. One of the fixed mindsets is we don't have the money. We have so many other things to deal with. This does not take much money. It depends on what you want to do. So I would say this, start with doing an assessment. Maybe do some of those things that I suggested in the beginning. But just start. Give a sermon. Do a text study on something in the Bible that you can relate to disability. There's so many things you can do that where money isn't a consideration. Money may be a consideration at some point if you decide, wow, we do not have one accessible restroom in this entire facility. Or we've gotten a request for a sign language interpreter. And whether that's on Zoom or whether that's in person. So I just urge you, be fearless. It's okay to make mistakes. As a congregation, as a community, you have the dignity of risk too. So, and that's what's so great about this journey, is that this whole time, we're really erasing those boundaries of them and us. And it's now just one us. So we can, Sarah, questions? We could.
Yes. Anybody have questions for Shelly? While those are coming in, I've got a question to start you on, Shelly, because I heard this just the other week. Is a congregation said, Sarah, what do we do? Our congregation is burnt out on committees and we can't do another one. So what would you tell a congregation like that who is burned out on committees? To start another one would be more negative than positive. What would you tell them?
Well, there's more than one way to get over the mountain. I know there's my own congregation here in Minneapolis did away with committees. We now have forums. And a forum,
Interesting.
yeah.
Yeah, I'm Presbyterian denomination, and everything is a committee.
Yeah.
So I feel this question.
Absolutely. One of the things that to think about, there is, and I'm really serious, there is the way to do something, and there's your way to do something. And we have to appreciate how our congregations go about the business of being a congregation. So there's, certainly the business end of things. What is that? If there's no committee, then who are some people who might be really passionate about this or interested? And think outside the box on that too. It doesn't have to be, the usual suspects, whoever you're thinking is a usual suspect.
Mhm.
And the thing is, without a committee, this will work, but it has to work in a way in that congregation or that organization that leverages what's already working. So if it's not a committee, then even better, because then, okay, belonging and inclusion are key parts of this. And we're going to want a group of people maybe to sit down and talk about assessments, for example, or raising awareness, just a small group. And, we can open it up if people want to come and just have this conversation. And from there, let's see where it goes. If there's interest, then let's bring people together just for this one thing. Okay. Does that make sense?
I like that a lot, Shelly. I think it's very, especially when we're starting new things, I get a lot of people who want all of the dots dotted, T's crossed, a full and clear path forward, but that's not how it always works. And sometimes you've got to start and just see where people are at. We had one question, we had one congregation who, instead of starting a new committee, they had all of their already existing committees do assessments based off of their categories and then come together and report on what fits like the topics within their already existing committees. So everybody ends up working on it together, which is almost, I don't know, I like that idea.
I like that. Actually, I really like that idea. There's got to be like at least somebody maybe coordinating that effort. But I really love the idea of the organizational areas doing, kind of looking at themselves, looking in that mirror and seeing what they're doing. The reason that when I wrote the assessments, they're not yes and no answers, and they're not to be emailed out. They're for conversation, because every time you have a conversation, you learn something new, and we're all like thinking, and it might bring you to another realization or something that you've never seen before just by being in conversation.
Right. So, absolutely.
Yeah.
Shelly, we have a question from Sarah Nesson. Hopefully I pronounced that right. She says, I was a bit late to the webinar, just wondering if you have addressed the importance of online programming that allows community members and guest teachers to participate who might not be able to get out of the house easily.
That is such a great question, Sarah. And I have words coming. The prevalence, the adjustment of keeping our communities intact has really started to find a permanent home, I think. in so many ways. Just as an example, this webinar, imagine if we all had to, if we got together in person, yeah, we'd sit for a little bit of time and so forth, and we'd have, a chat, and we'd be one and done. I think that the thing is that because we are doing so much virtually, we have the opportunity for more and more people to participate. And just in my own experiences in my congregation, we have a lot more people attending now than ever before. And I've heard that from my colleagues at this retreat too. So many more people are participating than ever before. I think the one area that is the most challenging is religious education for kids. They're zoomed out, their parents are zoomed out. It's hard. One of the advantages of that is it's a way for kids to build their own community and to meet their different learning styles. But for worship services, for study, for social events, those can all be done on Zoom or whatever platform. And I think that they really have opened up this whole world. And we did talk about accessibility in terms of transcript, which you have here, and setting up a live transcript for this. There's some issues with screen readers reading the chats that are going on while there's a speaker. So those are some things to be mindful of.
That is really hard. What is accessible for one person may be very inaccessible or problematic for another,
Right.
which is really hard online. And I don't even have a solution for it other than communication and checking in.
That's right. And right. And I think we really just have to be aware that there are some things that we can't get around yet. Even with Zoom, I mean, Zoom wasn't doing live transcripts. Facebook was doing live transcripts. YouTube would do transcripts on and so forth. Why couldn't Zoom? And instead, people were going out and hiring companies or just to do their live transcription or not at all. And there was such a pushback on Zoom. You have all this technology. What's the big deal? This is what people need to be part of this new world that we're experiencing, this new way of being in the world. So it's interesting. Some people really don't ever want to go on Zoom another moment of their lives. They want to be in person. But the thing is that not everybody can attend in person. And so we have to all work extra hard to make sure that both people in presence and people on Zoom are, feeling a sense of belonging. And I think, we're not there yet. I think we have work to do, and that's okay. This is all about constant change. So, yeah. Thank you, Sarah, for that question.
Anything else? We have a few more minutes. I do want to add, communication is almost always the answer or the first step in getting your answers. I have a friend, he is often a guest speaker to webinars, but the way his speech is, live transcripts don't pick up for him. So making sure, a lot of times I'll get a kind of a printed out version of what he plans to say ahead of time and can enter that into the transcript, but it's hard. It can only, those solutions can only be found through communication and asking, checking in, because not everybody will come to you.
That's right. That's why, that belonging really means being open and letting people know, you know what, I'm not here to fix you. Nobody wants that. Nobody wants to be fixed. We're here together to support you and to
Mhm.
support each other. And who knows, sometime I may need support from you. It's really, that's what community is. And that's what's so important. I wanted to say, I tutor kids at my synagogue for bar and bat mitzvahs. And I have a new student who is, he has some hearing, but the way that I introduce the materials for him would not be valuable. And so what we're going to do, usually I record an MP3 file. I'm going to be making video recordings, posting it on YouTube. And because this is Hebrew, I'm going to go in and do the transcription myself.
Mm.
So yeah, it's a little different style. And the thing is, when I met with him the other day, we talked about reading versus chanting, not verses.
Mhm.
And he's like, I don't like to sing. I said, okay. I said, that's not something that we need to decide right now. It really is meeting someone where they are at the moment. And I think that's the thing to remember. Go through biblical verses that have a bearing on how people are treated, on how people are chosen in the Bible for particular responsibilities. And I always think of Moses.
Mm-hmm.
Moses, a shepherd. He was a shepherd. He was kind of a quiet guy, P.S., who had, had an incident. Had an incident, yes. And God spoke to him and said, I want you to go back to Egypt and tell Pharaoh to let all the Israelites go, all the slaves. And Moses is like, what, me? What are you thinking? I can't do that. I don't speak clearly. And God said, yeah, who do you think made you that way?
Mm.
You have what it takes. And I will give you the first known accommodation in the history of the world. We'll speak for you. Imagine all the, if people had been left out because of a disability or a difference, imagine this world. It'd be so much missing, so much different. So, yeah.
Thank you so much, Shelly. I'm going to put the rest of our schedule up on all of your screens. We do have Welcoming People with Disabilities Across the Lifespan by Deborah Fisher in May. Then we have a group of self-advocates talking about in their perspective of what is ableism and how they have experienced this in faith communities. And then we have an accessing faith tips. I think we reworded this, but it'll be tips, tools, and resources for DSPs, people with disabilities, and their families, presented by Eric Carter. And then in November, we have again another session of self-advocates who will be telling us stories of belonging that they have experienced in their faith communities. So please stay tuned, and thank you all for being here.
Bye, everyone. Thank you.